what I'd like to do now is to talk in some detail about the structure of the program and also a little bit about its history, why Macquarie chose to go down this particular route in redesigning its research program. Traditionally in Australia, advancement between undergraduate degrees, the bachelor's degrees predominantly, on into higher degree research, which is predominantly in this country the Doctor of Philosophy, the PhD. 97% of our higher degree research students at Macquarie are enrolled in the PhD. Traditionally, that pathway has been built around what's called the add-on honours year. It's a fourth year to the undergraduate program. It's called a year, but it actually takes about 8 or 9 months. You get underway in it at the end of February, and the core piece of work that you do, which is a mini thesis, is usually due in October because it needs to be assessed and so on ahead of the December deadline for results. So it's more like an honours 9 months. And that's been long identified as a problematic situation in Australia, not only at Macquarie, but also across the whole higher education sector. For a number of reasons, questions have been raised about the honours year as a qualification, as a suitable qualification for people moving from undergraduate coursework programs on into the thesis-based, heavily research-based PhD program. Some of the problems that have been identified are that it doesn't provide enough solid, robust, extensive knowledge of the academic discipline in which you want to research for you to really have a broad and deep understanding of the field in which you'll be working. And that has consequences for the decisions you make about exactly what you're going to research. How well do you know the field when you come to make that strategic decision about what your PhD is going to be about? It also is often seen that it doesn't provide enough solid research training. So the actual skills that you're going to need when you advance on into PhD only come to you in the honours year in a very brief and schematic way. You've got 9 months in which to do some coursework, some research training, and then produce a thesis. It doesn't seem to add up to being enough. There are a number of other problems with the honours program as well, one being that it's not internationally recognised effectively. Almost every other educational jurisdiction in the world requires students to do at least 2 years of work between the undergraduate degree and their major research project in the doctoral program. That takes a variety of forms. The United States, for example, you enroll in a 5-year PhD program, the first 2 years of which are all coursework. While you're there, and you start to develop a research project, you reach a kind of crunch point at the end of those 2 years, and a decision is made about whether you're eligible to go on to research. So it's defined as a 5-year program. It's really a 2+3 program. And 2+3 is the model that's been adopted under the Bologna Protocol across the EU and a lot of other countries that have signed up to the Bologna model. What happened in Europe in the 1990s, all the education ministers got together and issued what's called the Bologna Protocol. Unsurprisingly enough, they did it in the city of Bologna. When you're in Europe, you have the choice to go to all these centres of great cuisine when you need to make decisions about important things. But anyway, under the Bologna Protocol, university degrees in Europe were standardised around a model of a 3-year undergraduate program, a 2-year master's program, and a 3-year PhD. So it's called the 3+2+3. So they also are looking at a 2-year pivotal point between the undergraduate and the high degree research program. The other problem, of course, that has arisen in, just to finish that point, Australia is the only jurisdiction that has this 1-year bridging point between undergrad and postgrad. So it's very difficult for Australian students with an honours degree who want to then go on to PhD elsewhere. It's very difficult for them to get their qualifications recognised. But over and above all of that, perhaps the biggest problem that's arisen with honours in the last 30 or 40 years in Australia is steadily declining student interest. There's steadily declining student numbers who want to enrol in honours. The actual volume of numbers of students is increasing, but that's because the overall pool of students in Australian tertiary institutions has been increasing. But between 1999 and 2011, the number of completed bachelor's degrees in Australia increased quite dramatically by 54%, 54.7% in fact. So 54% more bachelor's degrees were awarded in Australia at the end of that period than had been between 2011, in 2011, than compared to 1999. Only 27% more honours degrees were awarded, which means basically the number of students who were capable of doing honours was increasing by 54%, but the number of students who actually were doing honours was only increasing by half that. So there's a widening gap between the number of people who could do honours and the number of people who did. In the same period, the number of master's degrees completions in Australia increased by 207%, an astronomical increase. And one way of reading that, of course, is to say simply that the people who graduate with bachelor's degrees in Australia now are very attracted to doing master's programs, and they're not attracted to doing honours. And that's a problem for the universities. If you're going to mount a program, an expensive program, you've got to make sure that, that people actually want to study it. And even more than that, if you're going to use that program as the core gateway between your undergraduate coursework and your very important elite higher degree program, you have to make sure that it's an attractive and viable option for students to undertake. So that says a little bit about the background with why Macquarie and all other institutions in Australia are having the same debate, why honours, a question mark arose over honours. Well, Macquarie was just the first institution to break with the pack and do what a lot of institutions in Australia have been talking about for a long time, and that is to move away from honours and on to a two-year program as a way of structuring that sequence of degrees. There's going to be a lot of information on these slides, and I can't guarantee I'm going to address every one of the single points. But these slides and the information that's on them will be on the HDR website. So if there's anything that I don't explain or anything that's unclear in what I say, you will get access to this information through many other channels as well. But that says a little bit about the many reasons why, what Macquarie hoped that this new program would achieve, that it would be better in the academic education that you received, stronger sense of knowledge of discipline. It'd equip you with research skills that would be valuable in higher degree research, but also in employment. And something else, that it would give you a strong sense of belonging to a group. If you're in a small honours group with only 1 or 2 students, in 2012, the last year we fully taught honours, we had 190, outside of psychology, which is a qualification that will continue, we had 190 students doing honours in 60 different programs. So that basically meant that very small numbers of students were enrolled in each program. You don't get a strong sense of belonging to a cohort. When you go on to do research, it's very important to have that feeling of being supported by a group who can encourage you, help you with explaining things that you mightn't fully understand, point you in the way of conferences and articles and so on that can be helpful and relevant to you, just give you moral support when the challenges become, quite confronting. So there's a lot of advantages in belonging to a cohort, and in most other countries, people have a sense of a cohort, but that's been difficult to engender here at Macquarie. Okay, I'll move on to talk a little bit more about it. Okay, so we have 2 structures to a single program, and I'll say a little bit more about why that's an issue. I think I've covered most of those points as well. Why that's happened at Macquarie and the reasons that we've identified or named programs in a different way between different constituencies of students. Firstly, domestic students will be enrolled in this program, as Saki pointed out, in a hybrid Bachelor of Philosophy, Masters of Research program, whereas international students are enrolled simply in the 2-year Master of Research program. The reason behind that is to do with government funding, and I'll say a little bit about that in a minute. Firstly, for domestic students, the first year of the program is a coursework year. It's designed around 8 coursework units. After that year has been completed, students go on into the second year of the program, which is built predominantly around research, a single individual research topic. And there is the option, of course, of leaving the program at the end of the first year if you decide that research is not for you, and you will be awarded the exit degree, the Bachelor of Philosophy. The Bachelor of Philosophy is awarded at a number of institutions overseas as a higher undergraduate degree, so it's identified as a second undergraduate degree. For international students, they enroll simply in the 2-year Masters of Research program, and the program is identical in its structure and content. And similarly, if they choose to leave the program at the end of the first year, they're awarded the Bachelor of Philosophy. The admission requirements to the program are the same as they've always been for the honours program, so it does require a superior level of performance About 20–25% of students across the university completing their undergraduate bachelor's degree meet these targets. But overall, you need to have a GPA of 2.5 on Macquarie's 4-point scale, and usually a GPA at 300 level of 3. There's some flexibility around that. Some disciplines will actually require a slightly higher level of performance, and they'll also require some specialist knowledge. But if you're in those disciplines, you'll probably be aware of that already. And some will require some other form of assessment, a portfolio of work in creative writing, for example. But overall, the university standard of admission is 2.5 GPA overall and 3 at 300 level. It is possible for people who've completed a qualification that's considered equivalent to the work that's done in the first year to get advanced standing or credit, or what's called now recognition of prior learning, RPL, and move on into the second year. For example, if you've completed another type of master's degree, or you've completed an honours year, either here or at another institution, what you've done will be assessed and mapped against the content of the first year of the program, and you'll receive up to a full year's credit, or 32 credit points credit towards the degree, and be allowed to progress into the second year. There might be a situation where some of you, because of the discipline that you study and the discipline you want to work in, might be required to do a couple of extra subjects. But on the whole, that's the basic way in which direct entry will be administered. Okay, so just have to say a little bit more about why, for domestic students, we've had to give this degree a hybrid name. As I say, the actual experience that you'll have and the actual content of the program is absolutely identical whether you're a domestic or an international student. The reason that Australian universities, or one of the main reasons that Australian universities have found it difficult to make this transition, is the funding that the government provides for university study in Australia. Undergraduate study for domestic Australian students is funded under what's called the Commonwealth Supported Places, or the Commonwealth Supported Program. That's the HECS scheme, basically. You study, you enroll in a certain number of units, and you accrue a HECS liability over time that you repay through the taxation system. You're all painfully aware of how that works. That's the way the first year of this program is funded. So in the first year, you are enrolled and accruing. Domestic students are enrolled on the same terms in which they are enrolled for undergraduate programs, and accrue a HECS liability in exactly the same way. The reason that the government made such a big thing for us about making sure that this degree was actually not just funded by that scheme, but that you knew very well and very clearly that that's how it was funded, is that there are certain entitlements that are available to undergraduate students on the HECS scheme that are not available to people enrolled in postgraduate coursework programs. So we have to enroll you in an undergraduate program and report your results to the government as advanced undergraduate study, and we have to make absolutely certain that you're fully aware that from the government's point of view, you are an undergraduate student, even though you're progressing towards a postgraduate degree. There are certain things that are available to you through, especially through Centrelink, that as an undergraduate student, that are not available to master's coursework students. So the government was absolutely emphatic that it was clearly communicated to you that that was the way it worked. You will pay student activities fees, but also, as Saki mentioned, in the first year, students will receive a $4,000 scholarship for each semester of enrollment. So after the census date, which falls at the end of March in the first session, and at the end of August in the second session, if you're formally continuing your enrollment at that period, you'll receive a lump sum payment of $4,000 each time. Okay, for domestic students, the second year of the scheme, the second year of the program is funded in a completely different way. It's now on what's called the Research Training Scheme. The fundamental role of the Research Training Scheme is that it underwrites enrollment in Master of Philosophy and especially the PhD program. What that means from your point of view is that you don't pay anything, basically. The government funds research training in Australia by paying money directly to universities, and it involves no cost to candidates. So domestic candidates enrolled in the second year of the program don't accrue a HECS liability, and they don't pay tuition fees. The government picks up the tab to a certain extent. The university actually picks up a huge part of it, but the government picks up, the government does pay some of it, but none of it comes to you. Students advancing from the first year, domestic students advancing from the first year into the second year of the program, if they meet a performance benchmark, which is an average SNG of 75 or above, will receive a $16,000 stipend. And that won't be paid in lump sums, it's paid fortnightly through the normal university scholarship payment system. But it does require you to reach that benchmark of performance. You've got to remember, however, that that's not necessarily going to be highly challenging because you're all expert and elite students who had to meet high levels of performance in order to get into the program in the first place. You've got to remember, to get into the program, you had to get 65 average or more in your second year. And just in this, as you move into the second year, the performance expectation is rising a little bit. Now you need to get the average of 75 in order to continue with the stipend. Now for international students, the situation is slightly different. As I mentioned, they will enroll in the Masters of Research program in exactly the same way, as a 2-year program across the whole of the period, but they are liable to pay tuition fees. The university has allocated a certain amount of money towards stipends for international students on the same terms as for domestic students, but it hasn't committed to paying tuition fees in the first year of the program. It's the stipend that's available. The second year of the program, there will be some scholarships available to students, especially coming directly into that program, and there's a variety of different scholarships available from different government agencies in home countries. For example, China Scholarship Council has negotiated an agreement with Macquarie in which it's prepared to use its scholarships for a combined MRes Year 2 and PhD scholarships if you meet certain benchmarks of performance during that program. So there's a variety of different scholarship opportunities covering tuition fees for students from different jurisdictions. Okay, we'll just talk a little bit about what you'll actually be doing. As I said, the first year of the program is advanced undergraduate coursework. That's at a level significantly higher than the level that you'd be familiar with at 300 level. It's mapped onto the Australian Qualifications Framework, which is a big government bureaucratic document identifying the level at which all academic study is to be done. It's mapped onto the same level, level 8 of the AQF, the same level as honours. So it's a significant advance on the quality and level of work that you would be doing in an undergraduate program. 6 of the 8 units you do in the program are built around disciplinary content. So there's over 200 units available to students in the first year of the program across the university. You choose from that portfolio of units in order to design those, or to study in depth those that are most relevant to the area of your study. Of course, predominantly, students will have already identified themselves in a discipline and will choose those 6 units from their discipline. But it is possible, if you have a particular interest that's interdisciplinary and cuts across the university, the example that's often given is if your interest is, say, researching computer gaming, you might want to do units in the media department in the Faculty of Arts. You might want to do some in psychology in the Faculty of Human Sciences. You might want to do some marketing in the Faculty of Business, and you might want to also do some in computing, of course, in the Faculty of Science. You could conceivably put together your 6 units from right across the program. However, it will be subject to some academic advice. You will have to persuade an academic advisor that what you're doing is actually logical and coherent. On the whole, of course, most students have already made a commitment to a particular academic area and will build the bulk of their units from the program offered in that area. But there are over 200 available across the university, and it's negotiable to enter into every one of them. You also do a unit in research communications in the second semester of the first year. It was offered in the first semester this year, but next year will be offered in the second semester, in which you'll be looking at different ways in which research is presented and communicated in written form, in oral presentation, and also in multimedia. It's hugely important for you to start making the transition from writing the undergraduate essay to writing the academic journal article, or even more the academic monograph, which is the form in which high degree research is presented. And you'll also do a unit called Research Frontiers, which will be based either at the department or at the faculty level, in which what you'll be doing is investigating what are the key cutting edge issues, the controversies and debates that are really driving research in your particular academic area. You'll find out what are the really hot topics, often by being exposed in depth to the research of people in the department in which you're working. So you'll get a strong sense of exactly where the cutting-edge academic issues are unfolding in your particular academic area. And again, that's a way in which you'll be able to situate your research. You'll learn in detail about the background to the exact context in which you'll be doing your work. Second year of the program will be taught for the first time next year, and it's been designed in a slightly different way. First year of the program is on the Commonwealth supported scheme. It has to be built around units of study. Second year of the program on a research training scheme has much greater flexibility than that. So it'll be built around a set of activities rather than around a set of units. So it'll be a new way in which your academic year will be put together. The focus of the second year will be on the production of a short thesis in October. And the thesis will vary, its length and scale will vary according to the standards and conditions of the academic discipline in which you are. But the benchmark that we use is about 20,000 words. And in order to structure that thesis, you'll receive support in the introduction to basic research techniques. So you look at, again, there'll be a second Research Frontiers unit, which instead of looking at the discipline in which you work, will look in a more focused way at the subdisciplinary area in which you're interested. So you might be interested in English literature, and you'll be, in the first year, you'll look at the big issues that are dominating the field of English literature in general, but you might actually want to be researching Shakespeare. In the second year, your focus will be much more tightly on that particular fraction of the academic discipline. You'll do a literature review, which will be the background reading to your research topic. You'll do a course in research methodology, which will largely be not just general introduction to research methodologies, because you'll have a lot of that already behind you, but more focused on the particular research method that you're going to choose in order to build your own project. And you'll do comprehensive research planning. And that'll be in two phases, because the idea here is we want you to be thinking not only about the project that you're going to be doing in that second year of the MRes, we also want you to be thinking about the program that you're going to go on to do in your PhD. So you'll be planning a 4-year research project of which you will be doing a small part in that first year. Now, of course, the Australian system, or all university systems, work on the idea that you can't actually get 2 degrees for one piece of work, so there will have to be some distinction between what you do in that first year and what you do in your PhD. You can't just produce something in your first year that then you roll over and put in your PhD. There will be a distinction, but there should be an organic relationship between what you're doing in that first year, all the background that you're doing, you're getting an acquaintance with your field and so on. And that will be like a pilot project of a larger thing that you go on and do. So by the end of that second year of the MRes, you'll produce a comprehensive plan of what your PhD would look like. And the aim here, of course, is that the first year of the PhD, again, not only in Macquarie, but across the whole Australian sector, the first year of the PhD is a high-risk year for students and for institutions, because it's a year in which people have to define what their topic is and really get going on their own individual research project. And often they have to do it in a fairly unsupported way. They're just given, they're told to identify a topic and they have to work things out for themselves. It's an area in which there's a high liability of people dropping out and discontinuing. And that's when students do drop out of their PhD. They feel alone and unsupported in that first year, and their initiation into research is not structured and supported enough. One of the fundamental aims of the MRes is to give you that structure and confidence so that when you go on into your PhD proper, you'll know what you're going to research, you'll know what your methodology is, you'll be confident about that background of where your research project is situated, and you just feel altogether more grounded and situated in the research that you're going to do, rather than in that slightly undefined space that a lot of people already feel in when they enter into PhDs. Okay, so from the 1st of January 2014, Macquarie is making the big move, which is to change its admission requirements to the PhD from currently high performance in an honours program to completion at a high level of the Master of Research. If you want to go on from the Masters of Research into the PhD, you will need to get a grade of 75 in that second year of the program. What happens in the first year is immaterial. What we focus on in deciding your admission to PhD is your performance in the second year. If you reach the point of 75, then you can go on into the PhD. If you reach a score of 85, you'll automatically be offered a Macquarie University scholarship. So that's to encourage you to see what you're doing in the MRes as part of a transition, part of a logical sequence that flows on into HDR. Traditionally, what's happened is that people moving from honours into PhD have had to apply for a scholarship and enter into highly competitive rounds. And probably the cutoff that we've been looking at in the last few years for people entering into the PhD to get scholarships, which pay them a living allowance, currently you would need to get in the low 90s probably in order to be competitive for a scholarship. But Macquarie's decided to peg this for people who've completed the MRes. If they reach a score of 85, we're confident enough that they're so equipped to do a PhD that we'll offer you automatically a scholarship without application being necessary at that point. There'll also be a significant number of scholarships for international students progressing from MRes into PhD with the same average score. And enrollment for all students in the PhD will be built around a basic template of 3 years. Our logic is that because you've done this deep background in the second year of the MRes, you'll be able to progress confidently into PhD and complete in the standard time. All universities across Australia offer scholarship programs of 3 years plus the possibility of a 6-month extension, and that's what Macquarie will be offering candidates going into the PhD as well. And as I mentioned, Macquarie is very big on international exchange for research students. And the core way in which we do that now is through the CoachUTEL joint PhD program, which involves dual enrollment of students at Macquarie and at another overseas institution during the term of their degree. And CoachUTEL students spend a time here at Macquarie, at least a year at Macquarie. They spend at least a year at an institution overseas. They're supervised there, they're supervised here, they're working on a single project, and when they graduate, they receive an award from both universities. One award, but from 2 universities, which is a great way to have an international experience and really to broaden your knowledge of and develop your networks both here and overseas in 2 institutions. We are also looking currently at having, in developing an international exchange experience in the MRes, particularly in the second year of the MRes, brief period where people will be able to study and visit universities overseas.